My name's Stacie Bobele, and as Tracy Lee just said, I'm one of the Arts and Culture officers here at City of Greater Geelong. For the past few years, I've also had my own writing and editing business. I started that up predominantly to help artists with the written word. I work mostly in academic editing at the moment, but I also do a bit of grant writing on the side for a lot of not-for-profit organisations, mostly arts. So I do have a little bit of experience in the grant writing department, but when Andrea and I were talking about these workshops, I suggested that maybe we should divide it up into a writing about your practice workshop first, so you can really reflect on what you or your organisation is all about, and then you've got a really clear idea of where you might be heading, and that sets you up really well, I think, for applying for any kind of funding or support in the future. So I'll take you through a few basics of copywriting to start off with, but the workshop will essentially be broken into three parts. So first we'll look at the basics of copywriting, then we'll look at writing about your work, your practice or your organisation, and then finally we'll discuss how you can use all of this knowledge and apply all of these learnings within a grant application context. I saw this, I heard this quote just recently in a podcast that I was listening to that were interviewing Malcolm Gladwell, and he was talking about writing. He said that freedom is to be found in the constraints of writing. So what he meant by that is that if you have boundaries, it's often easier to actually to write. Another writer I heard say the other day that if you're a writer and you find it easy to write, then you're a liar or you're a bad writer. Yeah. And I've got to agree with that. But you shouldn't feel too overwhelmed by looking at a blank page. And I'm hoping that by providing you with a few guidelines to follow, then that blank page won't look too bad. So the basics of copywriting. Writing copy is largely about selling. And contemporary copywriting is also essentially runs on the premise that nobody reads anything anymore. So the idea is to draw people in strategically. You've got to use a combination of researching your audience, understanding them, and then speaking directly to them in the most economic of ways. So, of course, the degree to which this constraint is applied certainly varies. So this is probably not the starting point you should use when you're writing about your work, your bio, or your practice, but it is great when writing about an event or writing a grant application. So what this means is that you need to adjust your writing depending on audience and requirement. I'll talk about audience a lot tonight. There is no one-size-fits-all for good writing, but the basic tools of good copywriting can translate into any writing situation. You just need to pick which tools to choose. This sounds bad, but it's actually good. And this is what Malcolm Gladwell meant by finding freedom in constraints. These constraints will actually help you write more succinctly and effectively. In the second part of the workshop, we'll look at writing about your own work, and we'll have a look at the basics of structuring a great artist statement and bio. And then we'll move into writing about a specific project or proposal and using your learnings from your artist statement and the basics of copywriting in order to summarise a proposal and put it in the direction of the right funders, hopefully. So, the foundations. The secret to good copy is who, what, why, where and when. So, and this is a must for social media posts, event promotions, that sort of thing. To demonstrate this, I will use our invitation that we send out to everybody.
Stace?
Yeah.
Sorry, can I just say this is being filmed, so if you don't have to take notes if you want to rewatch the video after the session. We'll be sending it out. It'll be put on YouTube and then sent out to all of you, so you don't feel like you have to frantically take notes.
I will share the PowerPoint too. Yeah. Right.
Sorry, Stacie.
That's okay. So, you may have seen this invitation already. It might have come to your inbox. We sent this out a few weeks ago and it worked particularly well in terms of getting our numbers, so I thought I'd have a look at it and see how it worked. So, who is this aimed at? So, we knew already that this was aimed at people who were subscribed to our newsletter. They're probably artists, arts organisations, or people who follow the arts. They probably have some interest in finding out about funding and how they can get more of it. So in the first 2 lines, we've made it clear for whom this workshop has been designed for. So this grow your knowledge and build capacity through our arts funding workshops. So that screams, we can help you. So, and also what it does too is that all of the people who do not fit into the category of artists or arts organisations looking for money send this straight to their bin. They don't even have to look at it any further. So what? The most important but often overlooked is the what part. Like, is it an exhibition? Is it a workshop? Is it a performance? Now, this may seem really basic, but a lot of people actually miss this step. So people don't actually know what they're being told about. So it's really clear here. Free, and that's the important part, free arts funding workshops. So the why, what's in it for me? The what's in it for me part is for your audience. So it's not about you, it's about your audience, and I'll say this a lot. This is not about you, and this is all about the audience and what's in it for them. So appeal to what they want, even if they don't know that they want or need it. So we're telling them with the community grants opening in June, it's a great time to build your skills and knowledge, learn how to write effectively about your creative practice, how to plan your project from start to finish, and how to expand your creative business through smart fundraising. So that encapsulates our 3 workshops just in 2 sentences. This goes to the where and when. So where and when? It's on Tuesday, 16th of May. It's 5:30 to 7 at Wurriki Nyal. That's pretty basic, but again, this quite often gets missed, and you need to put it in a prominent place, somewhere where it's really easy to see, because if no one knows, they'll never show. So now I'll do a deep dive into audiences. So the deeper considerations of good writing practice. And all of these points need to be considered thoughtfully when you're, like, even before you put pen to paper. So we'll examine audiences a bit further, then talk about context or purpose. I'll brush on the importance of clarity and tone of voice. And finally, and most importantly, how you bring all these things together to think strategically and in an optimally informed way to write a fantastic artist statement, proposal or grant application. So the audience, you need to consider who you're writing for. Know your audience. So is your audience an informed audience? You can assume visitors to an art gallery at least have a passing interest in art, know a few other painters, techniques, and may even know your work. So a specialist audience, which is an informed audience but is also fulfilling a specific purpose, like say an application assessment panel, a thesis examiner, or a gallery owner, that's a specialist audience. A new audience. So a new audience, an example of this could be arts trail visitors. So these are like novices, you could say. Many people are along for the road trip, so they may not be what you would consider gallery types necessarily. There's also a wide range of ages, from small children to the elderly, and this does make a difference. You'll not be able to assume any knowledge in the viewer or your audience at all. And in fact, it's always better to probably assume or err on the side of a lack of knowledge than probably overestimate it. If you've got a mixed audience, so if you're looking at your website because you don't know who's going to be hopping along there, it's possible to be a mixture of both. So in your artist statement, write for a generic audience, keep it simple, straightforward, with a clear focus on who you are, your practice, the materials you use and where you exhibit. And your CV can then be used to impress an informed audience. So you include all the details about where you've studied, your other exhibitions, and other items of note that might be important to that informed audience. So context. This is the next one. What is the purpose of this piece of writing? So is it a statement or is it a bio? Is it to explain or is it to promote? Does this form part of an application? And what kind of application? Is it a residency? Is it an application for a grant or for a scholarship? Is it a postgraduate study application? Is it going to a website? And whose website is it going on? Is it a script for a video or is it a social media post? All of these things will inform the content of what you will write, how much you will write. Clarity. Now, this is the only bit of grammar that I'll come across tonight. I won't bore you with any more grammar than this, but this is really important, using the active voice. So basically the active voice is subject, verb, object. So this example, we, being the subject, will exhibit, being the verb, our work, the object, at the gallery in August. So not our work will be exhibited at the gallery in August. That's a really simple example. I was trying to think of the simplest possible. But quite often if you're talking in the passive voice, it means you're just adding extra words in there that you do not need. This is plain English, simple English, and it's what most people want and enjoy reading. So they don't need to read it twice. So you say it straight first. Keep it short declarative sentences with a call to action or to create curiosity or interest, and then inform. So these are a couple of examples I found just on Boom Gallery's Instagram. And I thought these were great. Like they literally had like one sentence or two, and then they'd have details about what they were talking about, like the date, the time, or the range of dates for an exhibition. When the gallery was open, it was just listed straight underneath. So we can't wait to raise a glass to celebrate Jeff Raglis's new exhibition Balancing Act tomorrow. Join us from 1 to 3 p.m. Saturday, 6th of May, to enjoy this impressive show and have a chat with Jeff. Now that's perfect. That's all you need to know. And plus they created interest by saying, we can't wait to raise a glass. You think, oh great, there's going to be drinks. And they're going to be celebrating, so it sounds like it's going to be fun. You know what the exhibition name is, and you know the artist and when, and you can also meet the artist. So they've said all of that just within 2 sentences. And then they've said this. This is another post. Have you visited this exhibition yet? So it's a question. Have I visited this exhibition yet? It's just so impressive. A mix of paintings and sculptural works, all in Jeff's iconic style. Plan a visit before it finishes on 21st of May. So it's a mixture of types of sentences there. It's creating curiosity. It's saying that it's declaring it as an impressive exhibition. It's telling you what will be contained in that exhibition. It's paintings and sculptural works. And it's got an iconic style. So that also makes you think, oh, you know, what's this all about? Another one that I really liked was a mug like this is about one of Peter Marie's ceramic works. A mug like this can only make your morning coffee even better. From the studio of Peter Armstrong, we are so happy to have these available in our design gallery. Another one, which is perfectly simple, but makes you, because it's relating it to your personal experience, it makes it all the better. Tone of voice is the next one to consider. So your tone of voice is your personality. This gets talked a lot about in marketing, but it's really important in terms of expressing your personality and who you are. This may be a relatively easy thing to arrive at if you're writing about yourself and your work, because you know who you are, you know what you want to be, and you probably have a pretty good idea of how you want to express yourself to your audience. If you're working within a larger organisation, this may be something that's a bit more difficult to arrive at. But I would recommend, if you are working within an organisation and you haven't established this as yet, you need to go back to scratch, back to nothing, and define some basic principles of who you think your organisation is, to determine that tone of voice. You need to do this as a group. Even if one of you may be the designated writer of the group, it's something that you really should do together and collaboratively. So, and when you're talking about tone of voice, the context that you're using that in can inform the formality of that tone, but inherently it should remain the same. This is a form of branding, and people will recognise if you change that tone of voice and it won't sound authentic. And a lot of people talk about authenticity, but that is really important, particularly within the social media area. People come to think of you as someone that they know if they follow you, even if they don't. So they will recognise if you do change it. So give some consideration to, are you friendly, are you professional, are you casual, are you clever, are you weird? So yeah, what's the vibe? How does it feel? And this comes down to knowing your audience and knowing exactly what and who you are. Thinking strategically. This is probably the most important part. So never assume that people know anything about you or your work. And the importance of communicating everything important cannot be underestimated. So you've got to approach every piece of writing as if your audience has never heard of you before. So you need to write to your audience and for your audience. So what is in it for them, not for you. So you need to think strategically. And when I say thinking strategically, it shouldn't be a frightening thing. What is meant here is that you should think clearly about all of these points before you put pen to paper. So what's the idea you're trying to share? Why will this matter to my audience? What's useful to know? Keep it short and to the point. For example, if you're working on content in a web context or on socials, you're writing to an audience that will be scanning your copy, not actually reading. But in the case of a grant application, it's likely your audience will be reading the application carefully, but these people have already read about 55 other applications and they don't want to get bogged down in War and Peace. So you need to consider that audience and your content accordingly. So use keywords, use dot points, and never repeat yourself. Okay, so this is the second part, writing about art. As the creator of an object, it can often be difficult to allow yourself enough distance from the evolution of your process to be able to write about it simply and succinctly. You've just poured your heart and soul into the creation of this object. You've changed your mind 1, 2, 300 times and you want to write about this process because you've been so involved with it. Unfortunately, sometimes as a creator of the object, it can often be difficult to allow yourself enough distance from the evolution of this process to be able to write about it simply and succinctly. You want to tell everybody how much hard work you've poured into your work. But this won't work. But then there's probably another group of you who'd rather stab yourselves in the eye with a blunt stick than write an artist statement. So you wrote your artist statement 6 years ago and you simply cut and paste that when you need it. But this too will not work. So words are not your enemy. And newsflash, writing about your practice helps your practice. And I was just talking to someone about that just this morning, of the importance of reflection and how that informs the next stages of your work and how you're going to progress. So I would recommend setting aside a date for reflection every year. Writing about your work and yourself should be seen as an opportunity to take a breath, look at the work you've done over the past year, take stock and set some intention for the coming year. It will help. Take my word for it. So I'll expand now upon what we've just talked about and how you might apply those learnings to your creative practice. So I'll return to this again and again. Your writing should be an introduction to your work and not an exhaustive explanation. Writing should complement your art. You're giving clues, laying an inquiring framework to the viewer, so leaving breadcrumbs on the path, if you like. Laying these breadcrumbs is your chance to, if not ensure the viewer gets it, they're at least pointed in the right direction. Do not describe, over-explain or elaborate. Your work can normally do this for itself. So you've got to think about, again, and I'll come back to these what, where and who, but what is the purpose of this piece of writing? So is it about your work or you? Is it about your work? It's an artist statement. If it's about you, it's your biography. Is it a project overview? Is it to explain or is it to promote? So is it a room sheet? Is it something that goes along with a catalogue that's in a gallery? Or is it a promotion in that it's going to go in an advertisement or a social media post? Or the gallery has asked you to provide something for that. Where will it go? Is it going to inform part of an application? And what kind of application? Is it a residency, grant or scholarship, postgraduate study? Is it going on a website? Whose website? Will it be published in a journal? Is it part of a thesis, script for a video? All of these things need to be considered along with who will be reading it. So as I referred to earlier, possibly the most important point to remember again is your audience, and are they informed or are they a novice? And this will inform both the tone and content. So the main difference, and I alluded to this before, between an artist statement and an artist bio is the first is about your art, not you. And a good artist statement should not get in between the reader and your art. It should complement, not be an impediment. It shouldn't confuse or distract. It should be, as I said before, just lay those breadcrumbs. Artist statements are needed for lots of different situations. When you're applying for gallery representation, you're applying for a residency or to support a grant application. They can sit on your website and other people's. It should be written in the first person, unlike your bio. So you say, my paintings are. Make your words as specific to the purpose and context as possible. So what do I mean by this? For example, if you've been asked to write a statement that will accompany a room sheet for your upcoming exhibition, you think about the purpose. So this is a room sheet to explain your collective works. The context is it will sit in a gallery for gallery visitors. So it's a knowledgeable audience. And they're people who are coming to your show. So they already know about you. Don't talk about your last show or your influences, and don't talk about your qualifications. Do speak to the theme of what you're showing right now and talk about where the ideas developed for this show and what this body of work represents. Only talk about the medium you have used in the show if it has informed the work itself. Keep it in the present. Write about your current work, not the historical progression of your work. Again, consider audience. So it's likely in this situation you'd be looking at you're looking at people who are knowledgeable somewhat about art, but there could be experts there. There could also be potential clients. So depending on the context, you could be writing about a particular series or specific work. If writing about a series, be global in your approach. So I mean by that, write about the group of works as a whole, not individually. So don't list each of them off in a long descriptive list. You can highlight just one or two important works and how they sit within the whole. So what you can include is like your motivation, your purpose for working, how your work usually develops or evolves during the creative process. Quite often this is the intellectual process and the physical process. So what do I mean by this? So the intellectual is the conscious intention you have. Regardless of what your work is about, landscape, portraiture, abstract sculpture, inspiration has not just come to you like a beam of light. As much as many people like to romanticise this notion, nothing ever happens to you as if it is in a dream. And you would know this. You know that you've done a lot of work prior to putting anything physical out there. So what did you think about in the days, weeks, months leading up to this? What had you seen? Were there social events or personal events that prompted your path? Think closely about the lead up to the creation of the work. The time before you sat down and started creating, and this will give you a lot of good content. The physical process refers to how you and your work is informed by the physical process of making. So examples of this are like the routines that are involved, the location of your studio, how you get there, physically approaching your work, how you stand at an easel, the physicality of making, movement, the influence of materials, different colours, textures, viscosity. All of this can really conjure up some really evocative descriptions. Make notes on all these things and then you can distill them down to a sentence or two. Be yourself. Even though I was talking before about tone of voice, this is a little different to becoming a persona. So, and if you create a persona, that's really hard to keep up. So be honest to yourself. And again, this comes back to authenticity. And people can see, they can sense your genuine personality shining through. And this can convert followers into fans and potentially buyers of your work. So yeah, it's a fine balance. You want to lead the audience to draw their own conclusions, but you also don't want them flailing around in the dark either. So you want to help them get the most out of your work. So your intention and purpose. So this may not necessarily form part of your artist statement, but could certainly inform what is in it. So this is probably something that needs to be thought about when applying for funding. You need to work out why you exist, what for, and how you hope to get there before you can make your work relevant to potential funders. Do you have long-term goals for your work? If not, what's your intent with your work in the immediate term? And what is unique about your practice? If you're part of an arts organisation or a collective, why do you exist? And what is your vision? And this process is similar to working out a tone of voice. So if you're part of a larger organisation or collective, you need to start with a clean slate and hash out that vision. I can't reiterate how important this is. It's something to return to for motivation as an individual artist, and for a collective, a shared vision is powerful, motivating, and provides clarity for everybody. So yeah, what to avoid? Don't tell, infer. This is not a manifesto. Keep it short, sharp and to the point. Keep art theory out of it. Leave the elaborations to art critics and boffins. Avoid speaking overtly about your influences or teachers unless this is relevant to your application. For example, if you're studying a specific technique or style, it's beneficial to include. Leave out the psychoanalysis and the, for I'm an artist and I must paint illusions. You need to be really specific. This being an artist may certainly be a calling, but it is your practice, and you need to explain the how, why and when so you can be distinguished from every other artist. This is important. So the artist bio. Now this is a little different because you're not talking about your work, you're talking about yourself. It's always in the third person, so Stacie is a writer, blah, blah, blah. And it's a concise personal statement about you, so items of relevance only. This can include where you live, where you studied, how long you've been practicing, mediums you work in and have experience with, goals, reflection, intention, not long though. Age and gender are somewhat irrelevant these days, but it's entirely up to you. Keep it friendly, add something that is unique to you, let your audience in and be a person. So once you've done all these artist statements and bios and you've written all of these things about your work, you need to review what you've written. So some tips for doing this, and I don't think I went for that. Yep. Read it out loud. How does it sound to your own ears? Sometimes when you've just written and rewritten the same thing over and over, it all makes sense. It won't make sense until you actually hear it. And then you'll also hear the repetition once it's said out loud. Leave it alone for a week. Put it away, walk away, come back in a week, and then have another look at it. Read it to a complete stranger or read it to a friend and tell them someone else wrote it. This is the only way you'll get an honest response. And some kind of perspective on its understandability and accuracy. So I'll share with you now, this is a bio that I actually really like, and I've used this example a couple of times, and you may know Rachel, she's a local artist, but I love how she's written this. Rachel lives and works in Geelong and spends most days working in her studio. She is a master's graduate from Monash University and has worked as a professional weaver at the Australian Tapestry Workshop. So in that first sentence, we know where she lives, she spends most days in the studio, and where she studied and where she's worked at a fairly up there organisation. But it's got a really whimsical feel to it. Rachel has exhibited consistently, locally and internationally in group exhibitions for many years. She is known for creating whimsical portraits of women. With a strong interest in drawing and historical tapestry, Hine builds small bodies of work that flow from one to another, often working through aspects of the human condition. Subjects like identity, perception and a sense of continuity are themes that Rachel is investigating. Working at all scales of size, Hine mainly creates very finely woven and intimate work, as well as larger, more dramatic works when appropriate. So it's got a really lovely tone. It's friendly. She's used a picture of herself when she's 4. So you get a really good sense of her personality just through 4 paragraphs. You also know what medium she works in, the size of that medium, what subjects influence her, and there's some really nice words in there that she's used too, like whimsical, the sense of continuity, finely woven and intimate work. Like these are all really lovely phrases that she's used. And when I follow up with you after this session, I'll send you a couple of other examples of really good bios and artist statements. Tracy Lee was telling me today she's got a couple of good ones. Now the elevator pitch, I don't know if anyone's ever turned around to you and said, so what do you do? And you put on the spot and you're like, oh shit, I can't even think what I do. Like even though you do it every day of your life, you're not able to put it down into 3 sentences. But it's a really good exercise to make you think about, I guess, the very essence of what you do. It's normally under a minute. It's in 2 to 3 short sentences. The shorter the better. The reason why I'm going to get you to do one now is because it's all about confidence. And again, it helps reassure you that you know what you're all about. So, my example, it's just really, it's really good to know, like you can explain things then before people's eyes glaze over and they stop listening. And it'll work wonders at parties too. So you'll also appear much more confident and professional when you're put on the spot And this can happen when you're least expecting it. You might meet someone, from a gallery, or someone who can introduce you to someone that you've really been wanting to meet for a long time. And if you've got that elevator pitch down pat, you'll look really good. So mine is, basically you put it down to what I do, why my work exists, how I do my job, and what work I produce. So you can jot all these down now, because I'm going to get you to think about it for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to get you all to stand up, and I'm going to get you to tell someone that you don't know your elevator pitch. So mine is, I'm a writer and an editor, so that's what I do. I help people, mostly artists, be understood in the written form. So that's why my work exists. I mainly develop content for websites and social media and assist artists and arts organisations with residency and grant applications. So that's how I do my job. I am often brought in to edit academic theses and strategic plans for academics and large organisations or projects. So that's what work I produce. So if you'll sit down, I'll give you I reckon we're really ahead of time. So I can give you at least 7 minutes to think about those 4 points, and then I'll bring us all together and we can stand up, have a bit of a stretch, and I'll tell you where we're going from there. Well, I hope you got something out of that, and that you, if nothing else, you've met someone that you didn't know before. But the elevator pitch is something that you should continually refine, just like your artist statement. Come back to it, see if it's still relevant. You can make it even more succinct as you go along. But yeah, it's really good, and it's a great thing for your confidence if you've got something that just sits there in the back of your head, ready to go whenever you need it. Now, this is the part of the evening when we talk about grants and applying the knowledge about writing that we've gained so far, or what I've talked about so far, to a grant application. Now, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail about what you need and what's best to do with the grant application. We do have another workshop coming up in a month's time that making grant applications easy, and I will go into a bit more detail, not necessarily how to write a grant, but how to plan for writing a grant, which will go into a lot more detail within the grant application space. So the last section was focusing on artist statements and writing about your work, and so the same basic rules apply when you're pulling together an overview of a project or a proposal that you put together for a grant application. There are occasions where you will be writing about your practice as part of a grant application, and actually the example that I'll be looking to is something like that. But the majority of the time you're actually talking about a project or something that is a bit bigger than your work, or if you are talking about your work, you're talking about something you'll be applying to your work to advance it in some way, shape or form, or to engage with a new audience, to bring in different parts of the community, that sort of thing. So, as I was saying with that, we'll be using parts of your artist statement, but usually you're going to have to describe what you're planning to do with the funds, and this will be in the form of a project and a budget. So you're essentially taking the rules of that artist statement that we talked about before, and you're applying that to a project overview. So again, I'll say it again, it's not about you. And when you're writing a grant application, it's probably even less so. It's about the funder and that funder's objectives. So how is your work or your project going to solve the funder's problem, so to speak? What impact will your proposal have in relation to their objectives? What solutions will your work or proposal provide? What are the intended benefits and how are they going to be measured? And that's another really important thing that you need to include. You're not outlining your project full stop, you're showing how your project aligns with the funder's objectives. So there are clues to be gained as to what you should be writing to, and so you need to review the guidelines. All grants will have guidelines attached to them. These outline the program's aims, like what the funding organisation hopes to achieve by providing the funds. Research is your friend. So look at the funder's assessment criteria. So that will be part of the guidelines. And some even provide you with a weighting of like each individual criteria very specifically. Others might hide them within their guidelines, and you just need to pay close attention to how they've written about these, objectives, which are essentially the criteria. So pay close attention to the objectives of each grant. You can find their strategic plan, have a look at that, go to their website, and this is normally they provide you with all of this as part of the guidelines. So they'll give you a link to their strategic plan. They'll give you a link to their website. It's just up to you of finding it. So you need to consider everything we've covered already. So who will be reading this piece of writing? What's your audience? So it'll be the assessors from the funding organisation. The context or purpose. The purpose is not to just gain funds for your project, it is to show how your project or proposal aligns with the funder's objectives. Clarity, again, I'm coming back to plain English and dot points where necessary. Dot points are so great in grant applications because you've got to remember how many applications these assessors have already read. Your tone of voice is to be confident and knowledgeable, as we said before, and most importantly, think strategically. So what's the idea? What idea am I trying to get across, and why will this matter to my audience? Why will this matter to the funder? What impact will this have? What's useful in here? What is my solution to the problem? Keep it short and to the point. And it's okay for repetition, but only with your key ideas and only if you're applying it to different objectives. So we'll go to... I wasn't going to do a Geelong grant, as we're still reviewing our grant guidelines, but I thought we'd look at a City of Ballarat Creative Inspiration Grant. Now this is a $1,000 grant that's offered to artists practitioners. This is directly from their guidelines. It's about supporting tactical thinking, new ideas, or simply overcoming obstacles to getting a project started or maintaining creative momentum. The intent of the Creative Inspiration Grant is designed to nurture the spark of creativity, which is one of the central themes of the Creative City Strategy. Now, in their guidelines, they provided a link to the Creative City Strategy. So that's a big, fat hint. It's like, go to our strategy and have a look at it. So, I do have a strategy, but I've got to find it. Just bear with me for a second while I grapple with the technology. Okay. So this is the guidelines that they provided in PDF form. And they've laid it out really nicely. It's very basic. It's only it's not even a large document, but it goes through what the program is, what the grant program is, important information about the application process. Now, before you do anything, you've got to make sure you're eligible. That's the most important thing. Don't try to make your project fit. If it doesn't fit, it's very clear to the funders that it doesn't fit. And it's a waste of everybody's time. So read closely what the objectives are, why it's been set up, which is what we went over before. They even say here, if your idea is one that requires a larger amount of funding, you might want to consider other funding options available to you. And they provide links to other grant applications, which I think is just amazing. And then they go on to who can apply. So this is the eligibility, which is pretty basic. What's on offer? Successful applicants will receive a grant of $1,000. Who's eligible to apply? You've got to contact a staff member. And then we go to the assessment criteria, which is important. So the first part's just pretty basic. You've got to write a 500-word response on how they will use the grant to inspire their arts practice and attach anything which might support the application. Now, when they say 500-word response, that is a ceiling. You do not have to meet that word count. If you can say what you need to say in less words, fantastic. And they say here the responses will be assessed on how they address at least one of the following criteria: how the grant would help further an artist's creative practice, how the idea will inspire ongoing arts activity in the city of Ballarat, how the idea will inspire engagement in the arts across the community, and how the idea will directly benefit or engage diverse communities in the city of Ballarat. Now, this is, if you went no further than this is all you would need to know, because going and having a look at their strategy, which is quite a large document, it's a 60-page document, you could sit down and read that if you want, and it's not a bad idea because you have a really clear idea. And if you're living in that area and you know the arts and culture strategy, fantastic. It'd be really, really great. But I went and had a look at the main goals of this strategy, which is on page 31. And 32. So they've got 7 main goals. And they've actually done the hard work for you, and they've actually distilled it into those objectives we just looked at before. But goal 1, what I got out of all of this, you look for keywords. From goal 1, can you read that? Probably not, it's too small. Trying to get it bigger. Come on. So they say here, Ballarat is a creative city with entire community participation, and they go on to expand on that. And so I've got from that community participation, inclusion, participation. So they want as many people as possible participating in the arts. So if your project involves engaging a wide and varied audience, fantastic, you've ticked that goal. Goal 2, Ballarat is a city where artists and creatives can sustain professional careers and prosper. So the keywords I saw there is sustain. They've also got in there that they're overcoming barriers identified during the stakeholder engagement to sustain a professional career in Ballarat. So if you can demonstrate that you found a way to overcome some of those barriers, fantastic. Goal 3, Ballarat has a strong domestic audience and consumer market for local creative product. They go into a bit more detail into that. What I got from those details was development of a creative market, increase audiences. So there's a definite theme. Like I went through each goal and just took out keywords from each of those. Goal 4, Ballarat's cultural visitor economy and market is continually growing. So visitor economy. You've got something that might bring in people from outside the region to visit with your practice or what you have planned in the long run. Now, with this kind of grant, you're not going to be able to put together some massive big project, but it might feed into, say, your long-term goals, like what you're hoping to do with your practice down the track, and that might, bring in larger audiences. But these are all big ideas, blue sky ideas, but it's all relevant. And this is how you work with every single grant you get. You need to find the keywords within their strategic plan and find out what they want. And on page 39, even with this, they actually lay out exactly what they want from creatives in their area. Artists, artisans, creators. Here's just a few suggestions for how you can continue to contribute. Professionalise your practice, engage in business management workshops, co-working or professional mentoring opportunities to learn new skills and grow your business. So if you could even apply for a grant to, undertake some PD that might expand your how you work. But anyway, so at the end of the day, it's worth looking at the strategic plan of the organisation that you are applying through. As I said before, I will go into more detail about applying for grants and how you go about that. But essentially what this grant's looking for is a 500-word statement. If you apply the same rules as what we were talking about before around your artist statement to your specific project, then you'll be onto a winner. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, and we are over time now, but I think it's really worth mentioning, is ChatGPT and AI. Now, everybody's probably done something in AI or with ChatGPT so far, because it's been talked about a lot, and apparently it's been the most taken up piece of technology ever released in the history of man. But so a lot of organisations are looking at it. I work as a volunteer on a local arts organisation committee, and you know, like you guys and like most not-for-profits, we're always looking for funding, and you're doing it with a bunch of volunteers that are pretty time poor. So the fantastic thing with ChatGPT is that it's a bit of a phenomenon in terms of saving you some time. It will not be your golden ticket. You will not be able to say, write me a grant application or write you a grant application. But you can certainly use it to refine things, and you may find that it will actually provide you with a really good starting point. The other day we were looking at setting up some processes around how we deal with exhibitions in our small gallery, and what I wanted to do was have some guidelines in place, so we made sure that everyone was taken care of and were following the proper guidelines. And I think I put in something like I told it to refer to, I said, can I have a gallery exhibition form? And it gave me an application form for someone who was wanting to put in an expression of interest to exhibit in a small art gallery. And then I said, can you revise that application form in format for use by gallery? And then it did that for me. I said, please provide an artist contract or user agreement between an artist and gallery that is approved by NAVA guidelines. And I don't know if everyone should know about NAVA, National Association of Visual Artists. They've got a really comprehensive code of practice. And it said, sure, here is a sample of artist contract or user agreement between an artist and gallery that is approved by NAVA guidelines. And it spat this out in 10 seconds. Now, we're not taking that verbatim, but it gave us a really good starting point, and we know that it's informed by those NAVA guidelines. Of course, we're going to double check and make sure it is, because I have had occasions where you've told it to do something it doesn't. But like if I put in something like all right, provide an artist's statement for Australian artist, bad typing, Ben Quilty. It generates away. The other thing to note too with ChatGPT is that apparently it's got limits on how many people can use it at one time. So you can go in there and go to use it and it'll be stopped for some time. So if you're doing something last minute, don't use it last minute just in case. So here we have an artist statement for Australian artist Ben Quilty. Now this is good because Ben Quilty's probably got a bucket load of web content out there that they can draw on. But the structure of this is the same as what we were talking about. So what his work is about, what he's interested in exploring, what he sees his role as, what techniques he uses, and I guess he's looking to the future too. Like, I'm also interested in the power of art to create change. Through my work, I hope to create a dialogue around important social and political issues. Ultimately, my goal as an artist is to create work that is both beautiful and meaningful. I want my art to engage viewers on an emotional level. Now, I'm not sure how Ben Quilty would feel about this being a direct quote to him, but that gives you a really good... and if you're wanting even a grant application structure, type in something like, please provide a project overview for a community arts event. And then, oh God, where am I typing? Not there. So please provide a project overview for a community, the more information you give it, the better, to use in a grant application. Now, if you get something back that's not quite right and you think, oh, that needs refining a little bit, you can put that, it remembers what it's just given you and it'll revise it. So it even gives you a title. Anyway, that's obviously just an example, but it's funny sometimes what it comes back with. But the main thing to see here is the structure it gives you. And this is, see how it's put it in dot points. The goals, what's going to be done as part of the project, the expected outcomes, and then I think it'll actually provide, it's going into budget, but I think it also goes into how we're going to measure the outcomes. It's talking about the partnerships you're going to engage with. These are all very useful things to know when you're putting together a grant application. So if nothing else, it's a fantastic guide. So as a free thing, it's certainly worth looking into. I would recommend just go and experiment with it yourself. Do not take it verbatim. Like, it is still a computer, and it's not going to be able to tell it, like, give it the personal touch that you will be able to give, but it'll certainly give you a really good structure to start with. So I thought it was certainly worth bringing up tonight. Yeah.
In terms of ChatGPT, obviously you can work out who's using it or if you've used it. Is the person who's written the grant, are they going to be marked down, or do you think that they will be kind of looked upon differently if they've used something like ChatGPT to construct their...
It's really interesting actually, because I sat in on a workshop about it the other day, and they were and what they did bring up, which I thought was a really good point, equity in grant giving has always been hampered by the ability of the person who was writing, which is inherently unfair. There's a lot of people out there that maybe can't write a grant application but have great ideas. So on the one hand, this actually probably makes the playing field a little more equal from that perspective. Like, you might not have the money or the means to pay someone to write your grant application for you, but this provides you with that starting point.
So you're not going to... What I'm trying to get at is, like, we're not going to get frowned upon if we decide to use...
No, because it's available to everybody. It's a free resource.
100%, but the thing is that if
and I'm saying too, you've got to pay really close attention to what's in there, and you need to make it like directly relevant to your project. And it will be obvious if there's stuff that's left in there that's not. But no, I don't think, and I honestly don't think that a lot of people would be able to tell really if you did pay that close attention to the outcome.
Are you? That takes away all your own or our own voices by putting that kind of content in there, doesn't it?
And that's what I mean. You should review it.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not saying use the words that they've used. I'm saying look at the structure.
As a template.
Yeah, look at the structure, because it's how it's put together that I find and it saves you a lot of thinking time. A lot of people go, oh God, like they're paralysed by not even knowing where to start with a lot of these applications, because it can seem a bit overwhelming. So this provides you with that, oh, okay, well now I've got it, it's almost like sort of like a template. Yeah. But the content I probably wouldn't look at too closely. Like, it needs to be about you, but the structure certainly is.
Would you say it's a kind of like, you're sort of, like I say, looking at the structure, maybe like replacing words? Oh, they talk about that there, but actually I could probably, that's where I'm going to cut and paste. Like you are. It's an editing, isn't it? It's a sort of a.
Well, you would need to edit it yourself.
Yeah.
I would go back. Yeah, I'd take it out of there, put it in a Word document, and then review it with all of your own content. And I wouldn't mean just take one word out here and one word out there. I would look at the whole thing. And you can tell how things are structured, look at how it's structured and say, okay, well, I'll tell my story using this structure. Yeah. Are you laughing?
Tell you an anecdote.
Yes, please tell us about ChatGPT.
I write musical theatre and one thing. So having written a complete musical in the last 12 months,
Yeah.
I took the same topics and put them into an AI, generate me a song based on this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
And it was able to not only regenerate my artwork, nothing, it wasn't the same.
Yeah.
But to all intents and purposes, for grant application, I could have constructed all of the lyrics and stuff for a set of songs for a musical in minutes rather than the months that it took me, because that's my art form. And I see this being your art form.
Yeah.
And you must feel threatened because the next step was you can now go to artificial intelligence and put the lyrics in and say, generate me a tune for this, right? And it does that for you now.
Yeah, well, and that is being done, isn't it? Like by...
You can get your harmonies and stuff like that.
And with specific artists too. I think there's been AI-generated songs by...
That's right.
Yeah, specific
so
artists.
It's threatening, it's challenging, rather than what you say. It's challenging not only the grant applications, but also the art forms themselves that you're applying for grants for.
Yeah. But it's something, but I really think it's like, because I did toss up whether to include it or not, but it's kind of like the elephant in the room. And I think it's, I do think it does have some positives, like I was saying. I think it does level the playing field for people who writing is not their forte, but they do have some great ideas and they deserve to, be considered alongside, because I've assessed a lot of grants, and if it's an impenetrable grant application, you can't do anything more with it. So it does help from that perspective, but I think it'd be probably a little bit irresponsible to not even talk about it at all, because it's here, and everyone will be using it. So I think approach it with your own I guess you still need to give it your own personal touch, is what I'm saying.
Can I just give an example of that? Those of you who are afraid of AI and everything like that, just remember in the 1850s, 1860s, when photography had its birth, artists thought the world was going to end. But I've met a few of them tonight, so they're still around.
You'll still need a human for a lot of things, I think. Okay, what we did think would be a great idea, because I know with a lot of these things, people sort of pack up, go home, and then don't use it for another month, and then go,